You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WYPC.
WCYTV
Here on the Daily Signal.
Good evening and welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC. We've got a lot to dig into, whether you're joining us on the live streaming platforms, YouTube, X, and Rumble, on our many radio syndication partners, on the TV, the podcast later. I hope you are ready for not just a week's worth of news, but a week's worth of news literally in one day. So we're going to start right from the beginning. President Trump has now announced that he intends to deploy the National Guard to Chicago after he is done with Washington, D.C. Check it out.
Chicago's a mess. You have an incompetent mayor, grossly incompetent, and we'll straighten that one out probably next. That'll be our next one after this, and it won't even be tough. And the people in Chicago, Mr. Vice President, are screaming for us to come. They're wearing red hats, just like this one, but they're wearing red hats. African-American ladies, beautiful ladies, are saying, please, President Trump, come to Chicago. Please. I did great with the black vote, as you know, and they want something to happen. So I think Chicago will be our next, and then we'll help with New York, and we're going to help with, and I think a lot of these people that you see on television, they are, including the people in this audience, they'll say bad things about me, and then they'll say, thank God he's here, because half of them got mugged, and they don't want to get mugged again. But
He's correct. And by the way, there are quite a few videos circulating on social media of people saying, Trump, please come to Chicago.
Hey, Trump, you need to bring the National Guards to Chicago, man. You got kids killing kids, man. That's not good, man. Washington, D.C. is not much going on compared to Chicago, man.
See, it's a lot of y'all out here talking about, yeah, Trump better keep it in D.C. He better not come to Baltimore. He better not come to Chicago. I got some bad news for you. He's coming to different cities. So all of y'all that want crime, unalivings, carjackings, theft, and terrorizing in your cities, he coming for y'all too, man.
Now, by the way, this ended up being rather prophetic because according to a Fox News report, I believe just 21 minutes ago, 19 states are now beginning mobilizing National Guardsmen. Well, here you go, straight from the horse's mouth.
And tonight, 1,700 National Guard troops are now set to mobilize across 19 states over the coming weeks. They are going to help Homeland Security execute a sweeping federal crime and immigration crackdown that is underway now. The order is effective August through mid-November, Fox News is learning. And a U.S. defense official tells Jackie Heinrich and Liz Frieden the National Guard being mobilized will effectively serve as a support pillar.
Now, again, this is something that has been discussed for quite a while. The idea of a National Guard deployment to certain major areas of the United States does have a little legal question behind it because, again, when Trump deployed the California National Guard to Los Angeles, initially, this was to protect federal buildings. Now, does the president have the authority to declare some type of emergency and then federalize troops and push them further into the city? Technically, and federal courts have in fact ruled that the president does hold power over the National Guard as the commander-in-chief. It's been that way since the 1930s. Now, this is going to put a lot of people in a tizzy. Pritzker and Brandon Johnson have already responded to the announcement that Trump is in fact on his way, at least getting ready to be on his way, to Illinois. I think we actually have this up over on the B-roll here. So Mayor Brandon Johnson has issued a little fundraising kind of email because, freaking of course he has. And he says, we take President Trump's statements seriously. But to be clear, the city has not received any formal communication from the Trump administration regarding additional federal law enforcement or military deployments to Chicago. Certainly, we have grave concerns about the impact of any unlawful deployment of National Guard troops to the city of Chicago. The problem with the president's approach is that it is uncoordinated, uncalled for, and unsound. Unsound, that's a stretch of the word there. And then he says, it's going to inflame tensions between residents and law enforcement. And then he says that it's not going to make Chicago any safer. And then tries to suggest that Chicago is actually Actually, homicides have fallen by 30%, robberies by 35%, shootings by almost 40%. And it turns out that, well, he's really stretching the truth there. And what was going on in Washington, D.C., where crime statistics were being manipulated, homicides essentially called, friendly, dispassionate, assisted, visiting of the extra dimensions, and perhaps a strangulation called an excessive hug. When you manipulate statistics, I'm sure you can say, hey, crime is down, it's wonderful. You and I both know that walking through downtown Chicago or the South Side or any part of Chirac after 6 p.m. is not in your best interests. And this brings us to how Trump is doing in Washington, D.C. Because when Trump went to address the troops of the 74th, here's what he had to say.
Unsafe. We couldn't do it. We'd go out and you'd see the stories, you'd read the stories, you'd see all of the things that are happening. And they said, we couldn't stand it, sir. And now I take my wife and my kids to dinner. One of them said he's gone out 4 nights in a row and he hadn't gone out for 4 years. So it's a great tribute to you. And when I look at...
I do want to point out here that, the difference is kind of night and day in Washington. I was mentioning to Reagan Reese, the Daily Caller's White House correspondent. She often records kind of update videos throughout the day, kind of influencer style. And in her last video, I believe it was the very first one, not right outside the White House, that she'd ever recorded from D.C., in which there wasn't trash piled up on the sides of the street in the background. Guys, it's okay for the nation's capital not to be a festering, disease-ridden pit. That's okay. Now, it also should be pointed out, and I think we had this as the first slide in the B-roll for this evening, the city of Washington, D.C. has now, for the first time in decades, gone not just a week, but 9 days without any homicides. This is the crime map for homicides in Washington, D.C. right now. No homicides on the map. None have been reported. That's a big deal. And the left doesn't even begin to know how to address this. They can't fathom tearing this apart. So, for example, Abby Phillips over on CNN on her panel, she is now even trying to admit, well, we all know there's a crime in D.C., but is this the best way to even, go about it?
No denying D.C.'s got a crime problem, but should these governors be sending troops from their states where they have crime problems to D.C.?
Again, it's a little bit ironic for a CNN host like Abby to be heaping scorn on the idea, well, we all know, yeah, sure, D.C. has a crime problem. Just a few days ago, I was told, you were told, that D.C. was perfectly safe. It was fine. It was wonderful. After all of the rich, white, multi-degreed liberal women in their Ubers ferrying from Alexandria, all to the nicest parts of D.C. for restaurant, and then back out in their Ubers. I've never witnessed crime anywhere at all. Certainly they're not walking down Anacostia in the middle of the night.
There is no need for these dangerous gun-toting policemen. We need more programs for the youth.
Yeah. What about the social workers?
Well, I mean, if you're suggesting we call out the National Guard in these cities, I think that's a different conversation than our nation's capital, the District of Columbia, which is a federal zone. And I don't think it's theater. I think it's working. They've arrested hundreds of people. They've gotten a number of violent criminals off the street. Just last night, they arrested an illegal alien and a member of MS-13. They've gotten a lot of illegal guns off the street. Half of all the non-immigration arrests have come in D.C.'s 2 most violent wards. There was some concern that they wouldn't be looking into the places where the crime is. That's not true. They actually have been. And so I have to say, with the amount of progress they've made in just these few days, if it improves a little bit in our nation's capital, that's good for every state, because every state has people that visit there all the time.
Now, that's Scott Jennings, of course, the most popular guest, and the reason that Abby Phillips' show over on CNN, the very reason, I should say, that show has any ratings at all. Now, I will put this as an aside, even though it's kind of the opening segment, which is typically a bit more news-focused. Abby Phillips then went on a podcast and said that Scott Jennings is the worst and he's crazy and nobody even likes him. The stupidity of Democrats, the ability that they have to walk through a minefield and pretend it is a park, is one of the most bewildering things to me. Radio crew, we're going to see you in a second. We know you guys have to head over to commercial per FCC rules. We'll continue on the live stream. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. For those of you on the live stream, here is Abby Phillips going after the most popular person on her show.
I'm never bringing people on to say crazy things. Let's be frank about that. That is never the intention, okay? People's decisions to say crazy things are never expected or predictable. However, I mean, and I know that folks really dislike Scott for his views.
What?
But I would say that, there are views that you don't like, that you think are unfounded, but that are pretty widely shared. And I think Scott falls into that category.
It is wild to suggest, well, I mean, people don't really like his views, but it's important we have diversity, as though she's the defender of diversity. I love it so much. It never ceases to amaze me how little they understand what is right in front of them. Great example is J.B. Pritzker. So now he has this big, huge Twitter thread he just threw out just about an hour ago, complaining about Trump coming, perhaps, to Chicago. And here's what he said. As Donald Trump attempts to create, I'm going to try to read this as Pritzker would read it, but as I don't have 2 or 3 Hostess snack cakes in my mouth while I'm reading it, it will be a little inauthentic, so bear with me. He says, as Donald Trump attempts to create chaos that distracts from his problems, we'll call it out for what it is. So brave. Trump and Republicans are trying to distract from the pain they're causing, from the tariffs raising the prices of goods, to stripping away health care and food from millions. Millions of who, JB? Not millions of citizens, that's for sure. Also, I love Democrats when they complain about tariffs, because up until 13 seconds ago, they were all pro-intervention in international economics, but I digress. After using Los Angeles and Washington, D.C. as his testing ground for authoritarian overreach, unnecessary comma, Trump is now openly flirting with the idea of taking over other states and cities. Remember when he took over L.A. and then, oh, that's right, he left. Took over. Oh no, he's going to take over. He's going to storm the bill. And then he hasn't done that. We'll let him continue. We don't play those games. The Trump's goal is to incite fear in our communities and destabilize existing public safety efforts, all to create a justification to further abuse of his power. I do want to point out that when you have fools like this that are criticizing guardsmen, you realize that the individuals who would be sent to Chicago are in the Illinois National Guard, yeah? That those are your constituents. Those are your citizens of Illinois. And they're going to destabilize Chicago? How so? Are they not also Illinoisans in Chicago? I'm confused, but not as much as JB. By the way, he does finish off by saying, he rants for a couple more tweets that are, ridiculous. You could basically vomit into a toilet and that would probably be about as coherent as his Twitter thread. He does finish by saying, the safety of the people of Illinois is my highest priority. So we will follow the law and stand up for the sovereignty of our state. That is the first time ever in history, if you're keeping track at home, that J.B. Pritzker has either, number one, cared about the safety of the people of Illinois, or 2, cared about the sovereignty of a state. There you go. It's the first time in history any of those things have crossed his mind. So very much looking forward to Governor Wrecking Ball rolling his way through that disaster. One other note here before we swing back and pick up the radio crew from commercial. I didn't get a chance to mention this yesterday. In a 5-4 decision, the Supreme Court has now allowed President Trump to cut $783 million in DEI research funding via various grants in the federal government. I say the Supreme Court allowed Trump to cut. That's not quite the correct way to phrase it. They have upheld Trump's right as the chief executive to direct the spending of executive agencies and grants from those agencies. And of course, the liberal crew that was very, 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 very upset about it. But again, you really, really wanting something to be gay does not entitle you to money. Now, we got to swing back and pick up the radio crew in just a second because we got to talk about John Bolton and Mark Carney. 2 guys having a rough week. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
It's the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIPC.
We're going to get to Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, in just a second, So if you'll forgive us, sorry, we're going to talk about another guy having a really rough day. That would be John Bolton. He used to be the national security advisor for like a year during the first Trump administration. And he is also a guy who I would suggest is one of the worst ambassadors to the United Nations that we ever had. The man has no spine whatsoever. A nice mustache, but no spine whatsoever. And my criticisms of Bolton are not, oh, he wanted to get us into wars and intervention. No. John Bolton was one of the key individuals who essentially was in favor of tying U.S. troops' hands behind their backs once they were in a conflict. So you would have troops go in. Bolton was one of the first to say, oh, don't hurt anybody. They'll hate us forever, which is not how one wages war. So Bolton, a national security advisor for a short amount of time, well, it appears that he has been harboring perhaps some certain classified documents, that he was told not to violate a certain series of laws regarding not just a non-disclosure agreement, but of course sharing certain documents of a classified nature when writing a book. Because if you ever go to DC, you have to write a book. God forbid I ever reach a point in my career where I think that you fine folks want to hear me drone on page after page in a book about my life. Ugh, that sounds horrible. Someday I might try my hand at writing like a novel, something that's like fun to read. And no books for me. But Bolton, he's got a book. We'll talk about Kamala Harris' suitcase full of books in a second, by the way. A lot of book shenanigans. So Vice President J.D. Vance, who I am not, for the record, he was on an interview with MSNBC where she asked, hey, we got word that the FBI is currently raiding John Bolton's home. What's up with that?
We've learned that the FBI is searching the home of former Ambassador John Bolton, his office as well.
Sure.
Can you tell me, why is the FBI raiding Ambassador Bolton's home and office, and did the White House get a heads up?
Well, so we're in the very early stages of an ongoing investigation into John Bolton. I will say we're going to let that investigation proceed. What I can tell you is that unlike the Biden DOJ and the Biden FBI, our law enforcement agencies are going to be driven by law and not by politics. And so if we think that Ambassador Bolton has committed a crime, of course, eventually prosecutions will come. But as you know, Kristen, this is all part of gathering evidence, trying to understand something that we're worried about. And of course, I'll let the FBI comment on the next stage of the investigation.
What's at the root of this? Is this about classified documents?
Well, again, I'll let the FBI speak to that. Classified documents are certainly part of it, but I think that there's a broad concern about Ambassador Bolton. They're going to look into it. And like I said, if there's no...
By the way, I want to point out, you can see how angry she is that all of the people in the intelligence community who were known for leaking to the media or suspected of leaking to the media have now had their security clearances revoked by Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, otherwise known as womp womp freaking womp. You actually have to do investigative journalism and rely on sources you're speaking to now. Producer Nick?
The frown lines have begun creasing.
The frown line
makeup paste on
so
her forehead.
Mean. I noticed it. I will say, yeah, on some of the media hosts' faces now, the frown lines are becoming rather dire. But we all struggle with wrinkling, as in fact we all go through the beautiful process known as aging. But if you take a look back in time, John Bolton was actually really in favor of the FBI raid on Mar-a-Lago when they were raiding Melania's underwear drawer. Again, for the sake of transparency, John Bolton being totally fine with this a little bit ago.
Any given moment. But I don't think he cared about the classification system. I don't think he appreciated the sensitivity of this information, and he didn't appreciate the sensitivity of how it was often acquired, the so-called sources and methods. So this had been briefed to him before I arrived. It was repeated frequently. I think it simply had no impact on him whatever.
I love that. Oh, no impact on him. Oh, just whatever. Jeff, USMC, he did send a super chat just now. Thank you very much for that, by the way. Appreciate the donation. He said, wonder if the FBI found the Disney walrus costume in Bolton's closet. That's freaking funny. And again, the whining, the complaints, oh, it's retribution. Oh, it's terrible. How could they do this? I'm so sorry. I just don't care. I don't. And yeah, you know what? Is this a little bit of retribution? Yeah, probably. Again, the entire crew in that administration, the Biden administration at the time, who advocated not just arresting Trump, not just bankrupting him for spurious crimes and nonsense that no one else had ever been held to that standard. Essentially, in Washington, D.C., you have an old boys club in which there are some rules people kind of fudge around the outside of. Yeah, sure, you're not supposed to keep classified documents, but, well, I mean, hey, whatever. Thanks to Glenn Rubel as well for the very, very kind donation as well. You have this old boys club. Sure, you're not supposed to take classified documents home, but you're likely to. There's a lot of pieces of paper out there. So we're not going to prosecute on everything because that's not what the law's for. And then when Trump rolled around, he acted like the presidents before him in that manner. And so following that, Biden got into office. It's like, we got to stop this man. So all of those laws that we've never really held to this standard before, we're going to go after him for everything. You had people like Letitia James in New York. It's like, we're going to turn one felony on a federal statute into 32 separate felonies charged at the state level, which is not legal, but did it anyway. And we're still seeing some of her cases, at least the penalties assigned to them, overturned and through appeals processes. So what does this mean for the situation right now? Some of the pearl clutching from those on the right who want people to just go back to the status quo where we all pretended everyone was nice and played by the same rules. The idea, as I often like to play, when Harry Reid in 2013 decided he was going to enact the nuclear option, in which federal appointees that had to be nominated to the Senate and confirmed would, after Harry Reid changed the rules, then only have to be elected by 51 votes instead of the prior original 60. And Mitch McConnell said, hey, you start changing the rules. You start playing stupid game. You may regret it. It's one of my favorite sound bites, regardless of what happened to Mitch McConnell later. I play once again.
Say to my friends on the other side of the aisle, you'll regret this, and you may regret it a lot sooner than you think.
Here we are. As I had the chance last night to actually speak at a Republican event in a town close by. And when speaking, I was asked a couple of questions about some of these prosecutions, about the sending the National Guards to the various cities. And I said I was very much in favor for it. And I got some tut-tutting and a little bit of chin-wagging. And a question that was a follow-up that, well, don't you believe in all of these really wonderful, nice things? And I said, I do, as long as everyone is playing by those rules. The problem is that right now, we are sitting down to a game of Monopoly in which the opponent is playing by a much harsher rule set than we are. And as the rules continue, the only way to de-escalate a situation like that is to play by the same rules. There has never been a single time in history when taking the high road, and I'm not going to play by your rules because you are but children rolling around in the dirt and the mud. Never has that calmed anything down. You show me one time in history in which individuals have started breaking the law to enforce political means. And then the other side sat there and said, well, I'm going to complain about this in an online column. And that worked. Please, by all means. When the Soviets started getting freaky in the Cold War, we said, fine, you want a box, here we go. Kennedy did not say, well, I guess Cuba can have nukes if they wanna. And he didn't do that. That was my attempt at a wimpy JFK accent. Not actually a JFK accent, which I can do rather well. Just in case we get comments about that later. Alas. Getting back to the news. So the John Bolton situation has a lot of people upset. None who are more upset, though, than George Conway, the husband of former Trump official Kellyanne Conway. George is a sad, strange little man, and he took pictures of himself, because of course he did, streaming outside the home of John Bolton this morning, and just, my word. I mean, one of the Village people, is it not? Oh boy, radio crew, I'm sorry, we got to let you head to commercial. If you're not watching the live stream, consider it. It's the Tony Kinnett cast here on the Daily Signal. Look at that. You can just almost hear him singing Young Man or Macho Man from the Village people, you know?
They always treat technology like it's like from aliens.
It really, it's a special one. Now, he did tell the media he knows why Trump is going after Bolton, apparently. The reason is because he's really mad that Bolton or Conway wrote a book about him. Ah, yes.
What I've heard, John Bolton was always fastidious with classified versus unclassified. So it's all about the fact that he wrote a book that was uncomplimentary about the president's mental capacity and other abilities. If that's what this is about, well, I think we should all start buying John's book and reading the passages about Donald Trump.
Ah, yes. As we all know, the great detriment to the chicken industry was the release of green eggs and ham. Ah, yes, that's some quality thinking there, Sherlock. I love the investigatory ability of these goovers. Go ahead.
I love the ad thrown in there. Make sure to buy John's book.
And use code Conway for 15% off at checkout. And also,
please buy my book.
Please say hello to my wife's boyfriend for me. It's incredible. So moving on to other, again, big international news. Prime Minister Mark Carney, who ran on being super tough to Donald Trump, who was going to get in there, unlike Pierre Poilievre, who was just going to lick Trump's boots. He was going to fight Trump, and he was going to stand up and Canada, and they were all going to swell in victory. Yeah, Mark Carney has now caved to Donald Trump on tariffs. Would you freaking look at the time? Here we are, yet again in the Trump cycle. They've caved. So, yeah, we have this one over here. Mark Carney, ladies and gentlemen.
So let's be absolutely clear.
Look at his sad face. This man looks like he just stepped on a dog. Oh my goodness.
Canada currently has the best trade deal with the United States.
But?
And while it's different from what we had before, it is still better than that of any other country.
I'm here for this. I'm sorry. Is there a way we can get Canadian tears mixed in with the maple syrup they send down now at reduced tariff rates?
So as we work to address outstanding trade issues with the United States, it's important, it's vital. We do everything we can to preserve this unique advantage for Canadian workers, Canadian business.
He doesn't want to say relationship, so he says unique advantage for Canadians.
And doing so will require both building on a soon-to-be revised CUSMA, our free trade agreement with the U.S. and Mexico, as well as developing a new form of trade and security partnership with the United States.
He wants to be a part of the Golden Dome. That's it. Again, the terrified, remember a couple of weeks ago, you were told, I was told, that Canada was, Trump was building this Golden Dome. Basically, essentially, Trump is building on top of the current U.S. missile defense system, which is a combination of technology from NORAD, the Aegis destroyers in the Atlantic and the Pacific, a couple of THAAD batteries at undisclosed locations, and some things that I'm not going to talk about on the air. But it should be said, and I want to make this rather clear, the idea that Canada was going to not capitulate to Trump on the economy, which, by the way, everything other than aluminum, automobiles, and steel are now that the tariffs are cut away. So the 25% levy, 50% levy on some products are now being completely wiped away. And as far as aluminum, automobiles, and steel, those are going to be revisited in the 2026 review of the USMCA. So there's a lot more to dig into in the news. We're going to get to it in a second. Have to pick up the radio crew. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. It's a phenomenal Friday.
He's the Tony Kinnett Cast.
It started with the whisper, and now it's when I kissed her.
Well, we have more on the beautiful amount of news that is coming out of Washington, New York, Chicago, and the Canadian blob. So MSNBC is in fact having a particularly rough one over the John Bolton raid this morning, and I would be remiss if I didn't share such cope.
He thought that the president's summit in Alaska with Vladimir Putin was going to be a disaster. In fact, even before the summit occurred, he said that Trump had handed Putin a win. In fact, Trump went to social media to criticize Bolton for those comments. And now, a few days later, we have this. We don't know there's a link, but we certainly know this is a president who has promised retribution.
Yes, clearly. See, Trump was sitting there and he was going, I'm getting ready to meet with Vladimir Putin. I wonder what the guy who looks like the ex-boyfriend of Colonel Sanders of Kentucky Fried Chicken thinks about it. This is a man who I clearly think about all the time. Trump, again, when Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away on the Supreme Court, someone was like, hey, did you hear Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away? You're telling me for the first time. Someone mentioned in a press conference this afternoon, I don't have the clip, I'm sorry, about Bolton very briefly. Trump looked surprised to hear that had occurred. Kash Patel doesn't go to Trump and like pre-clear things. No one in the Trump administration does that. That's why he's surprised occasionally. He hired a team of mavericks. But anyway, Karen McHOA has to get up here and give us her take.
Yeah, this is chilling. It really is.
I'm just chilling in Cedar Rapids.
Listen, John Bolton and I disagreed on many things back in the days when I was serving in public office.
Oh, she's going to be the civil servant. Back when I was a servant of the noble people, you know, I disagreed, but we had our decorum, you know.
But I don't think very many people that know John Bolton would argue that his beliefs were intellectually sound. You could disagree with him, and that he gave a lot to this country in terms of time and his intellect and his
pancreas,
work ethic. And it clearly, this is retribution. Clearly, this is using the FBI in a way that not only tarnishes the FBI.
No, not tarnishing the good reputation of the FBI. Gosh, what's next? If they are able to go after John Bolton, who are they going to go after next? A former president's wife digging around in her underwear drawer? What if they start going after religion? What if they go after like Catholic parents? What if you go to
domestic terrorists?
What if you go to a school board meeting and suddenly the FBI is looking through your stuff? Gosh, we could be right on the horizon of that. I mean, I certainly cannot imagine, you know,
Say to my friends on the other side of the aisle, you'll regret this, and you may regret it a lot sooner than you think. Say to my friends on the other side of the aisle,
stupid games, win stupid prizes. I'm sorry. I just don't care. I am not worried over this. Speaking of interesting things, after the judge's decision to release Kilmar Abrego Garcia back onto the streets, the man who beat his wife with his MS-13 tattooed knuckles, and then was sent to El Salvador, back to his home country, and everyone got really, really grumpy about it. Well, it appears that the Immigration Customs Enforcement crew is now about to deport Kilmar Abrego Garcia to his home country of El Salvador? No, somewhere right next door, though. Uganda. As soon as Monday, per emails from the Department of Homeland Security sent to Garcia's counsel.
Uganda, be kidding me.
Stop it. All right, so the incredible part of all of this is that the more we learn about Chris Van Hollen's drinking buddy, the worse it gets on the optics side of things. Released from Attorney General Pam Bondi, that this guy was soliciting child pornography and other things because, you know, of course he was.
Co-conspirator alleged that the defendant solicited nude photographs and videos of a minor. A co-conspirator also alleges the defendant played a role in the murder of a rival gang member's.
I mean, you know, just like all Maryland fathers do. I mean, come now. This is such a deeply important thing. In other news, Kamala Harris is also down really, really bad. And not just because it has now been released by our good friend of the show, Will Kane, that Kamala Harris spent thousands, tens of thousands of dollars on Uber Eats and ice cream in the span of not the entire campaign. What was here, we actually have the clip. Here's Will Kane explaining a little bit on this end.
$1.5 billion spent in 15 weeks for Kamala Harris. They burned through that on things like Oprah, ad space in the Las Vegas sphere, and ice cream, you know, the important stuff. So top Democrats have
$9,000 on ice cream. Bro, that's a lot. Yes.
Was that after she realized she was just going to totally lose so badly that everybody would just make fun of her forever?
I like that. The idea that the Kamala Harris campaign spent like $200 on ice cream through the 15 months, but on November 6th, it was just drop $8,800 on ice cream right now.
just sitting around crying with glasses of wine.
And you say, Tony, that's
Rocky
not fair.
Road.
She certainly her self-esteem can't be that low. I give you a video that Kamala Harris posted on her own social media today. This is the reason we need to add a chef's kiss emoji for the YouTube members, because you could not ask for just a better moment.
Okay, I almost forgot these. Let me make some rum. Actually, I think I have everything I need.
So many wonderful things. So if you're listening, which again, I really encourage you to join us on the live stream, youtube.com/Daily Signal. It's just incredible. Kamala Harris starts off the video by like awkwardly she's like standing awkwardly to the side, and she begins like, "Oh, I didn't see you there," and then steps into the room, and then's like, "Oh man, I'm gonna pack some alcohol, because God knows there's not enough rumors about me being sauced like Otis from the Andy Griffith Show. Hey, Andy and Marty, I'm just a little sauced this evening." But you've got Kamala Harris starting there, and then she goes to the other side of the hotel bed, meaning it like up against the wall, right, where you don't unpack a suitcase. So over where you would hide something from the rest of the hotel room, the camera pans down.
Okay, I almost forgot these. Let me make some rum.
A bunch of her 107 days books, 6 of them stacked in a weird, again, not like stacked, just like a weird little fan of her books, which, by the way, if you are traditionally, the idea of a book signing is that you would take your copy of the book to the person who wrote it and they would sign it. The whole selling your books at the book signing thing, again, the books were already supposed to be at the location. There was nothing more sad or more desperate than an author carrying their own books around. That's been a running joke on the Family Guy about Brian for years. Brian the dog, wrote a book once, never shut up about it. So that even Seth MacFarlane pointed out that liberals who write their own books and cart them around everywhere, oh my gosh, it's George Conway in the book. Go buy John Bolton's book. It's the same thing. Oh my gosh. Producer Nick, please.
Imagine her wheeling that suitcase into a Barnes & Noble's, just sitting down at one of the coffee tables. Please buy my book and let me sign it for you.
It's like when they sold, what was that really horrible game? That Fallout 76. And they were just, no one wanted to buy it because it was so terrible. So Bethesda started just strapping it to other things to sell. Like buy a KitchenAid mixer. Don't forget your copy of Fallout 76. That's how awful it was. Incredible. Like the U2 album that was so terrible they had to add to everyone's iTunes libraries. There was something for the Gen Z kids, something for the millennials, the Otis reference for the boomer. We're really good. I'll come up with a Gen X reference here in a minute. Maybe a Everybody Loves Raymond joke or something.
When you get a toaster with a bank loan?
See? Yeah. Get a bank loan, get a toaster. See, now we're making some progress here. Who is not making progress at the moment because I'm so great at segues? There was a media narrative that was pushed out this morning that was precious, suggesting that the real reason that the crew over on the left, this was at least their particular case here. I want to see if we can find this clip. I'm not sure if we'll be able to. The real reason that the Trump team was going after the John Bolton raid situation is because they were terrified of releasing anything about the Epstein files. And as they were saying that on air, the Department of Justice released a full transcript with victims' names omitted of the entire Department of Justice Ghislane Maxwell interview. Whoops. We're going to talk about that here in just a second. Radio crew, we got to send you off to commercial land. It's the Tony Kinnett cast here on the Daily Signal. Now, I've looked through the Ghislane Maxwell interview stuff, and I'm seeing a lot of people who are big fans of the president suggest, well, hey, she cleared Trump, essentially. She said, look, he didn't ever say anything inappropriate, never acted inappropriate. She appeared to make a couple of statements that were in support of the idea that in 2008, it was Donald Trump who was the whistleblower, the leaker, as it were, that said, this Epstein guy is kind of a pervert. That's kind of some of the statements that she gave fit along that particular narrative. I will be the Debbie Downer and say that doesn't mean much to me here, Because, yeah, I mean, she's, in custody with the present Department of Justice. It would make sense for her to say anything that could get her released from prison. That makes sense. Additionally, she also said some things like, I never saw Epstein molesting anybody. I never saw any of that, and she also said, I also don't believe he killed himself, which again, it makes sense for her to say those things. It does. I have seen a lot of pundits on the right, on the weird right, and then in the center, and then some really weird goofballs on the left who've kind of horseshoe theoried around with kind of the Candace Owens right, suggesting some very interesting things based on this Ghislane stuff. For example, well, wait a minute, if Ghislane said that she wasn't trafficking people, then why is she in prison? I mean, yeah, you realize that most people who are in prison never once said, oh yeah, I did it. Now, and additionally, by the way, to again clarify on the record again, Ghislane, the charges levied at Ghislane were not that she trafficked people for Jeffrey Epstein to other clients. The charges were that she was essentially the personal pimp for Epstein. Now, could she have done other stuff? Absolutely. But just to be consistent here, if you're going to make criticisms, read first. Really cool idea. Kind of a neat tip or trick many of us have picked up over the years. This is also why it's really funny watching the Democrats in the House try so hard to suggest that Americans are really mad right now about two things. Now, if you're on the right, I want you to think, what would people on the ground be annoyed with the Trump administration right now? If they own a big business, maybe they're unhappy about the tariffs, maybe. If they are in, for example, a situation where they have certain international relationships, maybe they don't like the foreign policy, maybe they don't like Trump with the National Guard if they're on the left or whatever. The House Democrats, though, have put their entire basket of eggs, all of the different eggs into one basket, which are a lot less expensive now, and have suggested that Americans are horribly angry about the big, beautiful bill, and they're also angry about Epstein. Every piece of polling data suggests that right now, like every budget bill ever, Americans really aren't mad about the big, beautiful bill. Americans just don't care. The budget bills being big suck sandwiches with some good things and some awful things, that's just stuff that we've come to accept. The idea that there is some mother of four in, for example, in the viewership of our Aurora station in Colorado, and she's sitting there going, so mad. Oh, sorry, we got to bring the radio crew back. It's the Tony Kinnett cast. Be right back.
This is the Tony Kinnett cast on 93 WIBC.
The idea that the House Democrats have that right now, the big, super duper, terrible, evil, awful worry is that Americans, like there's this mom of four who is out there in Colorado, very, 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 very worried and upset over the big, beautiful bill is ridiculous. The idea that there is a single mom in Georgia who came home and she's got all of these chores to do and kids to pick up and things to file. And oh man, I just really worried about the Epstein list more than anybody. It's not happening. It's just not. As the polls continue to show, Trump has an approval ceiling. There are things Americans are worried about. Right now, the things that Trump is addressing are big concerns for a lot of Americans. It turns out that the prediction that we made on the show, that Trump was going to use the tackling of crime in big cities, for example, with the National Guard, he was going to address in a lot of the same way that he did with the border, where we were told for years, well, you need a new law, a big bipartisan law with all of these extra rules. You know, if you want to solve murder, throw another law down. You want to solve illegal immigration? We need more laws right now. You see this with Mamdani. Oh, well, grocery store prices are really expensive. Well, clearly we just need more laws and state-run grocery store. That's the Democrat answer to things. Trump's like, we just enforce the laws that are on the books already. And like with illegal immigration, now with crime, no homicides, 9 days in Washington, D.C. There's a lot for this administration to again, develop momentum on while continuing to play zone. And by playing zone, I mean they've got a lot of people doing a lot of different things in their own wheelhouses. And it is still, we are in a place right now where there is no opposition leader against Trump. You can say, oh, it's Gavin Newsom for social media posts, which by all means, I really do hope that Democrats believe the secret to beating Trump is imitating his tweets, because after Gavin Newsom ends up 4th place in New Hampshire after spending hundreds of millions of dollars, you're going to hear the exact same Democrats have not achieved communications messages or whatever. So, by the way, I do want to thank as well yesterday's news channel, who threw a very kind and very true super chat down $20. Great move for the Democrats, doubling down, hitching the wagon to the thugs. They did it with Alvarado Garcia. They did it with the David guy, who has been evaporated from the news very quickly in Washington, D.C., who was screaming in Spanish, oh, I'm not a criminal. Criminals never lie about being criminals, of course.
I totally forgot to mention to you, the illegal that had caused the semi-accident in California had one of Trump's personal pens shipped to sign off on his deportation papers.
I like that. Again, the idea that getting all in for illegal immigrants is going to be something you can fight Donald Trump with. That's one of the reasons he won in 2016. Americans are tired of this. But the cultural focus is even better. So the left has, of course, talked a little bit about the insanity of the illegal immigrant. They hate the illegal immigration fight, that kind of a thing. Well, they're still sticking very closely to the racism angle. And that does bring us to a couple of things that you guys sent in for kind of a pseudo mail time reaction that I do enjoy. So the argument has been made that Donald Trump despises illegal immigrants who the left views as, slave labor. There are construction workers and there are hotel cleaners and our cotton pickers. I bet Trump hates them. He doesn't even like them. Trump brought the crew, who appears to be Hispanic citizens, I'm told, in this country. So these are guys who did the work. Fantastic. And tossed them a couple of challenge coins and hats and essentially told them to sell them on eBay for, over $10,000, $15,000. Here you go.
Thank you. Thank you. $25,000 on eBay. Thank you. Fellas, congrats. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate it.
As a dude, I do want to point out, challenge coins are freaking awesome. So those things all said, I'm finding too many videos of the Trump administration being decent to believe that right now there's an entire crew of independents in the country who are terrified of MAGA Hitler or whatever. I'm just not seeing it. Now, I am seeing the exact same videos on the left making really ridiculous cultural comparisons, like yelling at white people for not wearing shower caps around.
Quick little question for white people everywhere. See this thing on my head? The chef's hat that you guys like to call it. What do you think it's for? What do you think it does? What do you think the purpose is? Why do you think black people wear this on our heads for days or hours or however long? What do you think it's for?
Yeah, this is where the cultural focus needs to be. Again, that is a video that has gone viral, shared by a lot of the left-leaning influencers, like those who have been fired from the DNC because they hired a lady who knows nothing about men to be like their outreach director to young men. By the way, the idea that you're just going to stoke racial tensions because there is a kind of hair that if you wash it a lot is very, very frizzy and very, very poofy. I get it. So you don't wash your hair every single day. So to keep it from getting gross, you wear a bonnet. Or to keep it in a certain way, you wear a bonnet. Okay, cool, great. No one cares.
And you did know what it was anyway.
I know, shocker. I know that I know.
How did you know that?
Well, clearly, Nick. I mean, I mean, have you seen me? I'm very clearly black. That's the only way you can know something like that.
You can't even tell.
Yeah. It's the videos saying that you must live in a black house and it's them putting bread in the refrigerator. Like, I just grew up poor. We put bread in the refrigerator to make it last longer too. I don't know why that's special to a color. I think it's just people in America do.
Being ubiquitous among every single heritage, and each one thinking it's special.
The desperation to isolate off into cultural groups is such a weird thing. And I say that as a Hoosier who's very proud of things that Hoosiers do. None of those come with colors attached, though. And it's a very strange thing to see a crew that that strategy has not worked since 2012. Try that yet again. And by the way, meanwhile, while the actual governance in certain cities is a little bit rough, in the city of, where was this city of the fire hydrant bath,
LA.
Nicholas?
Interestingly,
Where?
LA, interestingly.
LA. Oh,
Good
of course.
Old Bass Town.
Good old Mayor Karen Bass. So again, as Gavin Newsom claims that he's solving the crime and the homeless problems, no guard needed. I give you the wise residents of LA taking baths in fire hydrants.
Splish splash, I was taking a bath. Long about a Saturday night. Yeah. Rubbed up, just relaxing in the tub. Thinking everything was alright.
By the way, that's what things used to look like in Washington, D.C. up until about 5 minutes ago. If you have never been, I do find it interesting how many people who say that our cities are totally fine, you don't see this kind of stuff in the suburbs because they vote against certain homeless policies in the suburbs, you know, in the soft blue suburbs. But then the inner cities, they never go into those. They never see things like that. The amazing display of, again, washing one's butt with a public fire hydrant like a bidet, as all Americans do. Probably another Maryland father. You've heard of the Maryland father. Get ready for Los Angeles mother.
It was really hot that day. You know, like when you have the fire hydrants open to cool off with?
Oh, of course. Yeah. I mean, you just wash your booty a little bit. That's something that all Americans do, I'm told. So amazing. We're going to cut away for some mail time. Radio crew, see you Monday. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. Sorry, I had to wrap that so quickly. I forgot where we were in the time because producer Nick had me watching in educational entertainment. Boy, put that on PBS and NPR right now. All right, we are going to go to just a little bit of mail time. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated and first on 93 WIBC. Mail time. Mail time. Mail time. Mail time.
On the Tony Kinnett Cast.
Just briefly, because I like you guys, we're going to do a smidgen of mail time for Bonus Tonus because the questions have been rolling in very quickly, and there are some bangers this week. So, from Dan B. This was on Wednesday. Didn't get around to it, but it's a great question for sure. Who are the odds on the favorite Democrat, or basically who are the odds on favorite for Democrat nominee? Does Newsom have a legit chance of getting the nod? I hear a lot of people saying that Newsom is the best bet. No, I don't see it. And the reason that I don't see it is that Democrats in the Midwest don't really care for Newsom. The days of relying on a voting bloc that was the union voters to really swing them through, Newsom's not popular with that crew. So then what do you have from that point forward? Like once you get past that crew, who's left? And the short answer is, well, you've got AOC. You have AOC. AOC is popular with some of the younger union members. She's popular with the far radicals on the left. She's popular with the suburban women, and she can pull the last remnants of kind of the Black and Hispanic voting bloc. That's it. That is all they have. So it's going to be AOC in 2028, barring some crazy dark horse candidate coming out and being normal but radical in the right ways. This would be like a Wes Moore, governor of Maryland. That kind of a candidate might do well. But Wes Moore is also like super duper duper pro-trans and not as good at hiding it or making it sound normal like AOC does. He has to kind of make awkward concessions. And upsetting the LGBTQ plus 2IA, 8765 Jenny, call my number, that kind of crew doesn't like it when people try to make excuses for them. And so the primary situation really just looks like it can be AOC at this point. I'm really not seeing something else in the meantime. Next question. This is from Chuck. Nice. Asks, Tony, what do you think of Trump acquiring 10% of Intel? So, the Trump administration announced today that he had secured, or the Department of Defense, I believe, had secured 10% of the Intel Corporation's shares in the stock market. And this was suggested as a kind of a national security issue and an economic pseudo-stimulus issue Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick was very, very excited, was praising this, saying, big news, the United States of America now owns 10% of Intel, one of our great American technology companies. This historic agreement strengthens U.S. leadership in semiconductors, which will both grow our economy and help secure America's tech edge. This is wrong. It's wrong. First of all, the United States should not be getting involved in private corporations unless there is a direct military interest at the time due to the Wartime Production Act. If that's not the case, no, you shouldn't be getting involved. I'm sorry. The idea that the United States government is going to be able to provide advice, that's what shareholders are, by the way, this being treated as some kind of a sovereign wealth fund, like, oh, well, as Intel grows, the U.S. is going to grow, so that's really great. No, that's not how that works. Every time the United States government gets involved in a business, the business proceeds to suck. You say, Tony, how do you know that? PBS, NPR, other organizations, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, institutions that were too big to fail, who no longer have an incentive to get out there and work hard because the government gravy train and the grants are always going to be coming in. American universities, excellent example of this. When the money's going to flow in, what incentive do you have to get better? Now, if this were NVIDIA or the Taiwanese TSMC, the Taiwanese chip manufacturing company, I would, again, have concerns, but not as much as I do with Intel, because Intel sucks. Intel sucks. Right now, let me see if I can actually cut over to this on Cam 2 here. Over there, right underneath the desk that I enjoy sitting at while I'm doing a lot of stuff cutting for the show. You can see our Slack window better minimize that. Right there, this is Charles. This is a computer that I have essentially been building and upgrading. It's kind of the workstation that runs some of the show stuff. And there is no way that I would put an Intel chip in that computer because Intel's garbage. And recently, since the show has grown so fast in the short amount of time that we've been on the air, we're now upgrading some of our equipment. I am in the middle of essentially building kind of a Theseus ship situation, a new workstation to run a lot of the show. I would not put an Intel chip in that thing, an Intel running motherboard. I would not put an Intel processor. Absolutely not. They're unreliable. They have a ton of design flaws. They suck. So the Trump administration trying to boost Intel here is essentially the moldy cherry on top of a really bad financial decision. You say, well, Tony, what would you do? I would cut regulations for tech companies of certain sizes. If they reach certain goals, I would say, look, you improve this, you do X, Y, and Z, we will make incentives for you. But I'm for cutting those regulations across the board anyway. Intel should be doing well because people at Intel are creating good products. If Intel's churning out bad products, giving them more money is not going to help them. You say, what's your example for that? The public school system. Giving Chicago public schools more money has not helped the students of Chicago. It's a bad decision. I'm sorry. It's a bad call. And Howard Lutnick should not have gone through with it. I disagree. Producer Nick.
I think one thing to consider here in counter is the strategic advantage of the consideration of TSMC producing a large portion of the Intel's silicon chips. Currently, their flagship products, Arrow Lake and Lunar Lake, have 30% of the Intel products outsourced to the TSMC factories in Taiwan.
I think there are some really good arguments for partnerships with Intel. There are really good arguments for partnerships with AMD or with NVIDIA or with SoftBank in the investment agreements. I do, and I am very much in favor. It is the only slightly corporatist bone in my body, the idea that the federal government should broker some types of deregulatory efforts. But again, the libertarian part of me comes in and says, well, why not just cut those regulations in general and allow state governments to say, yeah, you can't plop down a facility here and suck up all of the water table in this area. You got to go do that by like the Great Lakes or something, for example. So another question, by the way, which I really rather enjoyed, is, Tony, you say that the United States shouldn't I do have this right. Okay. Tony, you say that the United States shouldn't nationalize industries, but you are okay with the idea of the United States being imperialist. How do you reconcile the two? I love this question. I love this question wholeheartedly. Buying up territories is not the same thing as buying up businesses. It's not. The idea of increasing the land mass of the United States is not the same as seizing the means of production. It's not. The idea that the United States should, example, I think the U.S. should own Panama. I think that Panama should be a U.S. territory, not a state, not a voting populace. I think that Panama should be a U.S.-owned protectorate because the Panama Canal was built by the United States. We created Panama anyway by spurring the group of Colombian rebels to found their own nation. Can I get a Texas? Anybody? Sorry. So the United States should absolutely own Panama, but that doesn't mean that it should own the industries on the canal. Like the United States shouldn't own BlackRock. But the United States should absolutely hold territories around the country because where United States laws goes, things are better. And by the way, with that comes the promise of authority. So there was a guy that interviewed on the show. Do we ever air the interview in which the guy argued in favor of sending a ton of foreign aid to the Middle East? I don't think we ever aired that.
I strongly suggested we didn't, and then we didn't.
We did not?
No, never.
Okay. There was an interview that we never aired of a guy who came on the show. And again, in the interest of transparency, I air almost every interview that we do. There was one in which a guy said that he believed the United States investing in businesses in foreign lands was really good because then it would make things better and money would come back to the United States. And I hated that idea. I don't like that. My idea is this. If I am going to invest in a region, then I better own that region because then I also get to control the security, the taxation, and also have greater regional influence. If the United States wants a permanent presence in the Middle East, then it better freaking own a territory. Otherwise, I don't believe in long-term U.S. propping up of institutions. One of the reasons why I think that Israel should be weaned off of the purchasing agreement that we currently have. It's one of the reasons why I think that Saudi Arabia and Qatar should not have permanent assets in the Middle East unless we own the territory. Carve out some section that is U.S. You are now in U.S. zones. We own it. Don't touch it. That's a better foreign policy. It is. So that's kind of my idea behind that. A really good question. Now, there was a question from David Maskura, a little bit ago that I wanted to answer. He asked if I was also a sharecropper. And I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know what you mean. Do you know what is it like a joke? Or what am I missing here?
It was in reference to the bonnet video.
Oh,
yeah.
I get it. Okay. Nice. By the way, I there's another particular question that I did want to answer, and then I think we can wind things down for the week, unless any, absolute bangers pop in. There was a question as to where I learned what I had previously said about the Mormon afterlife, about trying to be good
South Park, maybe?
enough. And essentially the idea is that God would grant you your own planet to rule as a deity. So the answer to where I got that from is A, the Book of Mormon, and B, individuals who are priests, pastors, clergymen in the Mormon faith, in the Church of Latter-day Saints. That is 100% wholeheartedly where I got that. I do not talk about subjects on the air that I do not know. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not going to give you a complete theological discourse on Catholicism because I'm not a Catholic and I haven't studied the ins and outs of Catholicism. But I do know that nowhere in the Bible itself, in the Protestant canonical 66 books, or the Apocrypha included Catholic Bible, that basically works-based salvation and not accepting the sacrifice of Christ. I was correct in what I'm talking about there. In fact, I would recommend, if you're a Catholic and you want really good Catholic theology, I'd recommend friend of the show, Michael Knowles. Great guy. He does a theology segment on his show. Love him.
Very entertaining and informative.
Yeah, very entertaining, phenomenal guy. Certainly his producers who have used certain musical elements that are close to this show, we've certainly never talked about before either. So those particular things. There's actually one other great question that came in, and I'm being reminded of it before we hop off the air here, and it is a good one. Tony, you often criticize Marjorie Taylor Greene, Benny Johnson, and several other people on the right. They list like a couple of sentences worth. I said, but you'll also give credit to them. Are they credible or are they not? Very good question. So some of my differences with other individuals on the right are a little bit ideological or maybe methodological. I don't really care for example, certain elements of like how Benny Johnson does his show and his reporting. And there's a long-standing feud with him and other members of the right because there was a time where he would just kind of take content from others and he would like erase the watermark and then post it himself. The reason a lot of people on the right now watermark their content is in part because of Benny Johnson. So, but because I disagree with a lot of the stuff that he does, Benny Johnson also does some excellent reporting. His show's pretty good in a lot of elements, naturally charismatic, and I met him in person. He's a decent guy. I have no problem on like a personal level. So even if I disagree like on a personal level with like Benny Johnson on some things like how he may frame his reporting, and I may correct certain things if I reference his reporting, I'm still going to cite him because he's the one who did the reporting. Even if I don't like Laura Loomer, if she gets something right, I'm going to credit her with it. I don't see maybe the ideological inconsistency there. Now some might get a little salty, and I have been one of those, and say, well, broken clock is right twice a day, or as some of us Hicks would say, a blind squirrel finds a nut every once in a while. I mean, yeah, there are some who are more like that. I think Bill Maher would fit that category for me, or Jon Stewart. Occasionally, they get a little close to the truth, sometimes by accident, especially in Jon Stewart's case, on the left side of the aisle. But on the right, there are very few who I would be loath to grant them making a decent point. Great example of this would be Tucker Carlson. I'm not a fan of the direction that some of his content has taken in recent months and years, but I will always be thankful to Tucker for helping amplify my work after Indianapolis Public School. I was suspended for exposing critical race theory there. He directly intervened to make sure that my stuff was pushed. I don't see the idea of just because I mentioned that I disagree with something on the right, that means I'm punching right and I'm hurting the movement. If I ever see anyone at all as too holy for criticism, that should be a major red flag. And I'm not going to stay away from that. I've received pushback from people in my own organization before for criticizing people in the national correspondent world. During the day, I'm a national correspondent, and I go on TV networks, and there is always constantly a pitching of the person. Say, hey, you should have this person on the show because they're witty, smart, funny, articulate, whatever. Send me a Valentine's Day card about it. But there are some networks that will not have yours truly on, and that's totally fine. You don't have to have me on. But there are some networks that if you criticize people on the network, they will not have you on. And that is seen as an incentive to not criticize people on those networks. And I will say this, even though occasionally I criticize Jessica Tarlov on Fox News, for instance, Fox News has me on. Why? Well, because I don't go for personal attacks. I criticize statements. And number two, because Fox has a diverse crew on. Some Fox hosts will criticize other Fox hosts. That's great. Some Newsmax hosts will criticize other Newsmax hosts and content providers. Great. On my home station in WIBC, I will occasionally criticize the statements of other people, and they'll criticize works of mine. Awesome. Cool. That doesn't bother me. I think that we can exist in a movement. By the way, this infuriates the left, who never have each other on each other's show. This caused Jen Psaki to go into an emotional meltdown after the election. Because, by the way, if Benny Johnson ever invited me on his show, I'd gladly go on. And vice versa. Johnson is welcome on the show anytime that he likes. There's something about having other people on in the movement. Yesterday's news channel, actually, who sent a super chat earlier, great example of this. He does a lot of content on YouTube. We've worked together before. I don't know if there's specific things that I disagree with him on. I'm sure there would be. But you have people on the movement because you amplify good ideas. My audience as well. If you send me an email, go to tonykinnett.com, you shoot a message over, almost assuredly I will answer it. Why not? I don't see in our Discord. We have a Discord. It's a link down in the description. You're more than welcome to join us and chat. I'll answer any of your questions or criticism. You want to sling an insult my way, 110%. By the way, there are Mormons who tune in who may not have liked my explanation. You may not agree with me on the eschatology, the end times study, for the Church of the Latter-day Saints. I don't know if there are different denominations for eschatology in the Church of the Latter-day Saints. There are in Protestantism. I am a pre-millennial, pre-tribulationist in my eschatology, meaning that I believe the next thing that happens Although there's some question as to whether Daniel chapter 38 and 39 about another event that could occur. But the next thing that could occur is the rapture, and then the 7 years of tribulation, then the return of Christ, 1,000-year reign, and then eternity. That's what I believe. Methodists, a lot of them, don't believe that. There's all kinds of eschatological differences. You want to get two Protestants going, ask them about Calvinism. Hoo boy, Allie Beth Stuckey is a Calvinist, or at least I thought she was at one time. She and I have disagreed about it. She's a good friend, a very good friend. You have disagreements with people. I still watch Relatable, not just because I was a guest on it. And I have been told, not by her, but I think by her producer, she's tuned in a couple of times, which we're very grateful for. You do that in the movement. And I hope this doesn't come off as though I'm lecturing down to y'all about this, but you know, I don't know. I it's just something that I like these kinds of questions because it gives me an opportunity at the very end of the week to just, you know, yeah, I think that LJ is right. This feels like a philosophical discussion. Absolutely. End of the week, you know, 8:16 Eastern time, and answering a couple of questions from the crew who watches. I don't know. I mean, why not sit down and chat about it a little bit here? Hey, you know. So, sorry, I do enjoy. There was one comment that I thought was really funny. Someone's gaslighting me. Jacob Helms, who's a channel member, he says, "Rapture in September," they say. Oh, that'll for no man knoweth the time or the hour, or the day or the hour, depending on the translation. You nor I know when the rapture is coming. That's great reason for you to accept the sacrifice of our Lord and Savior and get saved, so that you go up with us, by all means. So that particular thing, I really do appreciate those of you who have stuck around with us over the last couple of weeks. Technical glitches aside, international traveling aside, it's a blast to get to do this show. We're coming up on 400 episodes. So that all said, have a wonderful weekend with your family. We'll be back on Monday, God willing, and the river don't rise. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on The Daily Signal, nationally syndicated and first on 93 WIBC. Take care.